sold for being barren. The Omega lowered her head as the Alpha King chose her before the pack. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character, Emily Vale. Emily stood in the middle of the auction block, her head lowered, her heart heavy with the weight of her failure. The crowd around her murmured in disapproval, their eyes cold and unfeeling as they looked at the woman who was deemed useless. The other Omegas had been claimed quickly, their futures decided by the will of powerful alphas who saw their potential. But not Emily. She had been sold, her family's debts paid with the life of their discarded daughter. At 23, she should have been mated, settled into her place within the pack, but instead, she was viewed as broken, barren, and unwanted. She couldn't shift, couldn't bear children, and that made her a liability. That made her invisible. The auctioneer called out her name with a sense of finality, a cold reminder that she was nothing more than a commodity, something to be bought and discarded. Emily Vale, he said, his voice echoing through the stone walls. Barren. No mate. No worth. Her shoulders slumped even further. She wanted to disappear, to shrink into the shadows, but that wasn't her fate. Not today. Not here. The crowd was indifferent, some sneering at her, others whispering cruel remarks. But then, the doors of the auction hall creaked open, and the atmosphere shifted. The noise in the room died down, a sudden hush falling over the gathering. A tall figure entered, his presence commanding the space. It was the Alpha King, Caleb Thornridge, the ruler of the Northern Territories. His dark eyes scanned the room with an icy precision, his gaze stopping on Emily for a moment. A shiver ran down her spine. The crowd parted, almost reverently, as he moved toward her. She didn't know what to expect, but she certainly didn't expect him to stop in front of her and speak. I'll take her, Caleb Thornridge declared, his voice cutting through the silence. Emily's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever chosen her before, and certainly not someone of his power. His gaze met hers, and for the first time, she felt like she was seen, really seen, not as a failure, but as something more. His hand reached out, his fingers brushing against her chin, tilting her head slightly, so their eyes locked. You are mine, he said, his voice soft but filled with authority. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Before the pack, before everyone who had ever dismissed her, he had chosen her. And in that moment, she felt something stir inside her, hope. Caleb Thornridge had seen beyond her scars, beyond her brokenness, and in doing so, he had given her a chance at a new life, one she had never dreamed possible. As Caleb Thornridge, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, stepped closer to Emily Vale, her heart raced. She had never experienced such an intense presence before. His power radiated from him like a palpable force, yet his eyes held something unexpected. There was no judgment, no disgust, only a quiet recognition that made her feel both terrified and oddly safe. The crowd remained silent, watching as he reached out to her. His large, calloused hand cupped her cheek, the warmth of his touch contrasting with the cold tension that filled the room. Emily stood frozen, not sure if she was dreaming or if this was some cruel twist of fate. You are mine, he repeated softly, and the words were like a spell, pulling her into his orbit. She had heard the rumors about the Alpha King, his cold heart, his ruthless rule, his complete detachment from those around him. Yet here he was, standing in front of her, making a declaration that no one had ever made before. Emily had always been the outcast, the Omega who was weak, barren, and invisible. Now, she was being claimed by the most powerful man in the Northern Territories. Her mind struggled to process what was happening. For a brief moment, she thought about running, about refusing to accept this fate. But there was something in Caleb's gaze, something that told her she had no choice. She was bound to him now, whether she was ready or not. As he took her hand and led her away from the auction block, the pack watched in stunned silence. The weight of the moment was not lost on her. This was more than a mere transaction. It was a shift in the very fabric of her life. The murmurs of disbelief filled the air, but Caleb paid no attention to them. His focus remained entirely on her. As they exited the hall, Emily couldn't help but glance back at the crowd. She had spent so long feeling like she didn't belong, and now she was being taken by the very man who ruled them all. The journey to the palace was short but silent. Caleb never spoke, and Emily didn't know what to say. She was still trying to process the events of the past few hours. The grand stone gates of the palace loomed ahead as they approached. Emily had heard whispers about the Alpha King's home, the lavish halls, the walls lined with ancient tapestries, the opulence that came with ruling the northern territories. As they entered the palace, Emily was struck by the contrast between the grandiosity of the space and the emptiness she felt inside. She was still the same broken Omega she had been just hours before. Caleb led her through the corridors, his hand never leaving hers. She could feel the strength in his grip, the silent power that he exuded. When they finally reached the grand chamber where she would be staying, Caleb stopped and turned to face her. "This is your new home," he said quietly. Emily nodded, unsure of what to say. She had never imagined she would end up here, in the heart of the northern territories, with the Alpha King as her mate. But as she looked up at Caleb, she saw something in his eyes, something softer than she had expected. Was it pity? Or perhaps understanding? She didn't know. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow, we will begin your training." Training. The word hung in the air. Emily had no idea what kind of training she would need. She had no skills, no power. She was just an Omega. But as she lay down on the bed, the weight of the day finally settled on her. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the doubts and fears that crept into her mind. Caleb Thornridge had chosen her, but what did that mean for her future? And what would life be like as his mate, when she was nothing but a broken, barren Omega? Only time would tell. The days that followed Caleb Thornridge's claim over Emily Vale were filled with an uneasy silence. Every moment she spent within the walls of the palace, she could feel the weight of her new life pressing down on her. The grand halls, the luxurious furnishings, and the silent servants who passed her by, all seemed foreign and distant. She was still the same girl who had been sold like property, still the Omega who had been cast aside by her own pack. And yet, here she was, acclaimed mate to the Alpha King. Caleb's presence was constant, though he never spoke much. Each time he entered her chambers, his gaze lingered on her, but his words were few. He was a man of action, not of words. Emily learned quickly that his silence was not out of indifference, but rather a deep, quiet strength. He didn't need to speak. His every move commanded respect. Yet, Emily could not shake the feeling of being an outsider in his world. The first morning after their arrival, Caleb had ordered a servant to bring her breakfast, but it was no ordinary meal. It was a feast, enough to feed an entire family. Emily sat at the long dining table, staring at the array of food before her. She had never known such abundance, nor had she ever felt deserving of it. The food was rich, the flavors unfamiliar, but still, she could not bring herself to eat much. "You need to eat," Caleb said from across the room, his voice calm. But there was an edge to it that made her look up. His eyes were fixed on her, his expression unreadable. "You are weak," he added. "Your body needs strength." Emily hesitated but eventually picked up her fork. She wasn't sure if she was hungry or if she was just doing it to please him. She had spent so many years going without, living off scraps, that the idea of indulgence felt strange. Caleb watched her silently, his piercing gaze never leaving her. Emily could feel his eyes on her as she ate, as though he was waiting for something. She wanted to ask him what he expected from her, but the question died on her lips. She didn't know how to ask, or even if she had the right to. Later that afternoon, Caleb's voice broke through her thoughts again. "Tomorrow, we will begin your training." Emily looked up from her book, startled by the sudden announcement. "Training?" she asked, confused. Caleb nodded, his expression hardening. "You will learn your place here. You are my mate now, and that comes with responsibility. You will learn the ways of the pack, how to be a true Luna." Emily's heart raced. She had no idea what it meant to be a Luna, no idea what kind of training she would need. She had been nothing but a broken Omega for so long that the idea of becoming something more felt like a dream. "But I don't have any skills," Emily said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to be what you want me to be." Caleb's gaze softened for the briefest moment. "You will learn. You don't have to be anything but yourself." The pack will follow you because they see the strength in you, the strength I see in you. His words, though simple, made her feel something stir within her. She didn't know if it was hope or fear, but it was something. I will help you, Caleb added. But it's up to you to accept your place here. Emily nodded slowly, unsure of what the future would hold. She had been thrown into this world, claimed by a man she barely knew, and now she was expected to take on a role she didn't understand. But as Caleb's words lingered in her mind, she realized that she had no choice but to move forward. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was the only path she had. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure what would come next, but she would find out. Caleb Thornridge had chosen her, and that choice meant something. It meant that she wasn't invisible anymore. It meant that she was someone to him. And maybe, just maybe, she could become someone who mattered, someone who could stand beside him, strong and proud, as his Luna. The next few days passed in a blur for Emily. Each morning, Caleb would summon her to begin her training. She felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety as she approached each new lesson. The first was simple enough, learning the ways of the palace, how to navigate the grand halls, the customs of the court, and the expectations that came with being the Alpha King's mate. But Emily quickly realized that her training would be far more than that. Caleb had not only chosen her as his mate, but had also given her a responsibility she had never imagined. The pack would be watching her every move, and she needed to be prepared to lead them, even if she didn't know how. One afternoon, Caleb instructed her to join him in the royal garden. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the vibrant flowers and manicured hedges. Emily followed him silently, her heart pounding in her chest. The Alpha King had never been one for small talk, and today was no different. Caleb walked ahead, his long strides purposeful, his presence as commanding as always. You will need to learn the ways of the pack, he said without turning to look at her. The pack needs to see you as their Luna, their leader. They will test you. Emily nodded, though she didn't fully understand what that meant. The thought of leading a pack, of standing beside Caleb in such a role, felt daunting. She had never been a leader, never even been seen as someone worthy of respect. But I don't know how to lead, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb stopped walking and turned to face her, his gaze softening for the first time in days. You don't need to be like me, Emily, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. You need to be yourself. The pack will follow you because of who you are, and because I believe in you. His words were simple, but they struck something deep within her. Caleb had always been strong, unwavering, the kind of leader everyone respected. But he was asking her to be something different. He wasn't asking her to be perfect. He was asking her to be real. That night, after their conversation in the garden, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in the large, luxurious bed in her chambers, staring up at the ceiling, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what to think, or even what to feel. Caleb had chosen her, but what did that mean? Why had he chosen her, the Omega who had nothing to offer, the Omega who had been cast aside by her own pack? Was it just a duty, a responsibility he had to fulfill? Or did he see something in her that she didn't understand? The next morning, Caleb's voice roused her from her thoughts. Today, we begin something different. Emily sat up in bed, startled by the intensity in his voice. She had grown used to his quiet, commanding presence, but today there was something new in his tone. He was offering her a chance to prove herself. I want you to meet with the elders of the pack today, Caleb continued. They will test your worth, your ability to lead. They need to see your strength, even if you don't see it in yourself. Emily's heart raced. Meeting the elders was a daunting task. She had heard whispers about them, powerful, respected wolves who held the pack's future in their hands. If she could prove herself to them, perhaps she could finally start believing that she was more than just the Omega who had been discarded. As they made their way to the meeting hall, Caleb walked by her side, his presence a quiet comfort in the midst of her nerves. You will do fine, he said, sensing her anxiety. Just remember what I told you. Be yourself. The doors to the hall opened, and Emily stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The elders were seated in a semicircle, their eyes fixed on her as she entered. The room was silent, the weight of their gaze heavy on her. She felt small, unworthy of their attention. But as she stood before them, she reminded herself of Caleb's words. She had to do this for herself, not for anyone else. Slowly, she lifted her chin, meeting their eyes with a quiet determination. "I am Emily Vale," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves that threatened to overwhelm her. "And I am ready to stand by Caleb Thornridge, to lead this pack with him. I will prove my worth, not just as his mate, but as your Luna." The silence in the room stretched, the elders exchanging glances. Emily could feel the weight of their judgment, but she refused to look away. She was stronger than she had ever known. Caleb had chosen her, and now it was time for her to prove she was worthy of that choice. The following days brought a new sense of purpose to Emily's life. The weight of her position as the mate of the Alpha King, Caleb Thornridge, began to sink in as she navigated the complex world of pack politics. Each interaction, each glance, seemed to carry more significance. She was no longer just an Omega, sold and discarded. She was now expected to stand by Caleb's side, to be his equal, to fulfill the role of Luna, the future leader of the pack. Caleb, though still a man of few words, began to include her more in the decisions of the pack, teaching her the intricacies of leadership. Emily attended council meetings, where the elders discussed matters of great importance, territory disputes, alliances, and the welfare of the pack. She listened intently, her mind racing to understand the delicate balance of power and trust that kept everything in motion. There were moments when she felt completely out of her depth, when the weight of her new role threatened to crush her. But with every lesson, every piece of wisdom Caleb shared with her, she felt herself grow a little stronger. One evening, as they walked through the gardens, Caleb turned to her with a rare expression of approval. "You're doing well," he said, his voice soft but filled with an unmistakable warmth. Emily looked up at him, surprised by the praise. She had been so focused on proving herself that she hadn't realized how far she had come. "Thank you," she replied quietly, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "I'm just trying to live up to what you expect of me." Caleb gave a small smile, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite place. "You're more than I expected, Emily. You're stronger than you think." The words lingered in the air, and Emily couldn't help but wonder if Caleb truly believed in her. It was a thought that both frightened and encouraged her. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about his words. She had always seen herself as weak, broken, unworthy of anyone's attention. But Caleb's belief in her, his quiet support, made her wonder if maybe she could be more than the Omega she had always been. The next day, Caleb informed her that the pack would be hosting a gathering, a celebration to honor the unity between Caleb and Emily, the new Luna. The event was important, a way for the pack to officially accept her as their future leader. As Emily prepared for the event, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She had spent her entire life hiding in the shadows, and now she was expected to stand in the spotlight. But with Caleb by her side, she felt a little more confident. The evening arrived, and the grand hall was filled with wolves from all over the territory. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of food and drink mixing with the excitement of the crowd. As Caleb and Emily entered the hall, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to them. Caleb's presence was undeniable, commanding, but Emily felt something stir within her as she stood next to him. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She was with him, and that made her feel like she belonged. The evening unfolded with speeches and toasts, the pack celebrating the future of the Northern Territories. Caleb spoke briefly, his words simple but filled with authority. When it was Emily's turn, she stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been one to speak in front of others, but she knew this was her moment to prove that she was worthy of the role she had been given. "I stand before you today as your Luna," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I am honored to be by Caleb's side, to lead this pack with him. Together, we will face whatever challenges come our way, and we will protect our people with all that we have." The room remained silent for a moment, but then, slowly, applause filled the hall. The pack accepted her, not just as the Alpha King's mate, but as their future leader. Emily's heart swelled with pride. This was just the beginning. She had a long way to go, but with Caleb's support and her newfound strength, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed the celebration were filled with both anticipation and uncertainty. Emily had made her official debut as Luna, but the true test of her ability to lead was only beginning. She spent her mornings studying the customs and traditions of the pack, learning how to address the elders, how to make decisions that would affect the future of their people, and how to represent Caleb in his absence. Despite her growing confidence, Emily still struggled with self-doubt. Every day, she looked to Caleb for guidance, but he remained a man of few words. He was always there when she needed him, but he never gave her the answers she sought. Instead, he pushed her to find her own path, to trust her instincts and her growing connection to the pack. One morning, Caleb called her to his private study. The large room was filled with books, scrolls, and maps of the territories. Caleb stood by the window, looking out at the sprawling lands that stretched beyond the palace walls. "There is a new challenge," he said as she entered. "One that requires your attention." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The weight of the pack's future always seemed to hang over her, and Caleb's serious tone only added to the pressure. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nerves that bubbled beneath the surface. Caleb turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "There is unrest in the Western Territories," he explained. "The neighboring pack has become more aggressive. They are testing our boundaries. They think we are weak because of the new leadership." Emily's stomach churned. She had known this day would come, the day when the pack's enemies would challenge Caleb's rule. But she hadn't expected it to come so soon. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Caleb's gaze softened, but his eyes still held that familiar intensity. "You will meet with their leader," he said. "It is time for you to show them that you are capable of leading, that we are not weak." Emily nodded, though a sense of dread washed over her. She had never been in a position where she had to negotiate, let alone face a rival alpha. But Caleb was right. This was her chance to prove herself, not just to the pack, but to herself. The meeting was set for the following day. Emily spent the evening preparing, going over everything she had learned about pack politics, about the delicate balance of power between alphas, betas, and omegas. Caleb gave her a few final pieces of advice before she left. "Remember," he said, "you do not need to prove anything to anyone but yourself. Show them your strength, and they will follow you." The next morning, Emily rode out with a small group of Caleb's trusted warriors. The journey to the Western Territories was long, the landscape changing from the lush forests surrounding the palace to the rugged terrain of the borderlands. As they arrived at the rival pack's territory, Emily's nerves only grew. The area was starkly different from her home. The air was dry, and the land was covered in rough, uneven rocks. They approached the rival pack's stronghold, a large stone fortress surrounded by high walls. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as they were led inside. The rival alpha, a tall man with sharp features and a cold demeanor, stood waiting for them. "I am Alpha Marcus," he said without a hint of warmth. "And you are the new Luna?" Emily held his gaze, her spine straightening. "I am Emily Vale, Luna of the Northern Territories." She didn't flinch under his piercing stare. This was her moment to prove that she was not just Caleb's mate, but a capable leader in her own right. "I've heard of you," Alpha Marcus said, his voice filled with disdain. "But I wonder if you can truly lead. You are a female, after all, and your pack has just come under new leadership. What makes you think you can stand against me?" Emily took a deep breath, reminding herself of Caleb's words. She did not need to prove anything to Marcus. She only needed to be herself. "I may be new to this role," she said, her voice steady, "but I am not weak. I stand with my pack, and I will protect them. You may think you can intimidate me, but I will not back down." The tension in the room thickened. Alpha Marcus studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "Very well," he said finally. "Let's see if you truly have the strength to lead. But know this, if you are not willing to fight for your pack, I will take it from you." Emily stood tall, the weight of his words heavy on her shoulders. But in that moment, she felt something stir inside her, a strength she had never known before. This was her pack, and she would fight for it, no matter what. "I will protect my pack," she said firmly, "and I will not let anyone take it from me." Caleb's words echoed in her mind as she looked at Marcus, her heart steady. She was ready. This was just the beginning. The tension between Emily and Alpha Marcus hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The cold stone walls of the rival pack's fortress felt oppressive as they stood facing each other, the weight of their words hanging between them. Emily stood firm, her heart pounding, but she refused to show any sign of weakness. Caleb's teachings echoed in her mind. Be strong, be steady, and never back down. Alpha Marcus studied her closely, his gaze unwavering. For a moment, it seemed as if he were trying to break her, to force her into submission, but Emily held her ground. His eyes narrowed, as if searching for any sign of hesitation. You speak of protecting your pack, he said slowly, his voice dripping with skepticism. But words mean nothing in this world. Power is what matters. Do you have the strength to defend them? To stand against me? Emily's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was the challenge she had been dreading, but it was also the test she had been preparing for. I don't need to prove myself to you, she said, her voice steady. I know who I am, and I know what I'm capable of. I will protect my pack, with or without your approval. For the first time, a flicker of something passed through Marcus's cold expression. Was it surprise? Or perhaps respect? He didn't answer immediately, instead turning to one of his betas, a tall wolf with dark eyes. Test her, Marcus commanded. The beta nodded and moved to Emily's side. Emily instinctively braced herself, unsure of what would come next. The beta, without warning, pushed her toward the stone wall. Emily stumbled but quickly regained her balance, her wolf instincts kicking in. She could feel the strength in her limbs, the power that Caleb had encouraged her to embrace. You may be Caleb Thornridge's mate, the beta said with a sneer, but that doesn't make you worthy of leading this pack. Let's see if you have the courage to back up your words. Emily narrowed her eyes, her jaw set. I don't need courage, she said, meeting his gaze. I have conviction, and that's stronger than anything you can throw at me. With a growl, the beta lunged at her, but Emily was ready. She sidestepped quickly, using the momentum against him. Her body moved with a fluidity she had never known before, her wolf spirit rising within her. She pushed him to the ground with a swift, controlled movement, her hands pressing down on his shoulders. I don't want to fight you, Emily said, her voice calm but firm. But if I have to, I will. I will do whatever it takes to protect my pack. The beta, stunned by her strength, slowly raised his hands in submission. You're stronger than I thought, he muttered, his pride wounded. Emily didn't release her hold immediately. She wanted him to understand that this wasn't a game to her. Strength isn't just physical, she said softly. It's the ability to make decisions, to lead when others are afraid. And I will do that, no matter what. She let him go and stepped back, feeling a sense of accomplishment she hadn't expected. As the beta rose to his feet, he glanced at Marcus, who stood silent, watching. The tension in the room had shifted, and for the first time, Emily could see the slightest hint of approval in Marcus's eyes. He may not have said it, but his silence spoke volumes. Caleb's teachings had not been in vain. Emily had passed the test, and in doing so, she had taken one more step toward becoming the leader she was meant to be. As she left the rival pack's stronghold with her warriors, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just Caleb's mate anymore. She was Luna, the leader of the Northern Territories, and no one would be able to take that from her. The days that followed the test with the rival pack were filled with a mixture of relief and reflection for Emily. She had proven herself to the pack, but there was still much to learn. Caleb had been pleased with her performance, but he remained as distant and reserved as ever. The silence between them lingered, but Emily had come to understand that it wasn't a lack of affection. Caleb's way was one of quiet strength, a man of actions rather than words. Yet, she couldn't deny the growing bond between them. She had learned to trust him in ways she never thought possible. As the sun dipped below the horizon one evening, Caleb approached her in the palace gardens, the last light of day casting long shadows across the stone path. Emily had been walking alone, her thoughts consumed by the challenges ahead. The quiet of the garden was a welcome reprieve from the demands of her new life. Emily, Caleb's voice broke through the silence, deep and calm. She turned to face him, her heart quickening at the sound of his voice. He stood there, his figure tall and imposing, yet there was something gentler in the way he looked at her. I've been watching you, he said, his tone serious but not unkind. You've proven yourself to the pack. But now, it's time to prove it to yourself. Emily's brow furrowed slightly, confusion mixing with curiosity. Prove it to myself? She asked, stepping closer to him. You've been given a heavy responsibility, Caleb continued, his gaze never leaving hers. Not just as my mate, but as Luna. You need to understand that leadership is not just about strength. It's about understanding those you lead. The pack needs to see your heart, not just your power. Emily took a deep breath, absorbing his words. It was true. She had spent so long focusing on proving her strength, her ability to protect and defend, that she hadn't considered the emotional side of leadership. She had never learned how to connect with others on a deeper level. Caleb seemed to sense her hesitation. "You are not alone in this," he said, stepping closer. "You have me. But more than that, you have the pack. Trust them, and they will trust you." His words, simple yet profound, struck a chord within her. She had always felt like an outsider, unworthy of such trust. But here Caleb was, offering her not just his support, but the trust of the entire pack. "How do I start?" Emily asked, her voice steady but unsure. Caleb smiled slightly, a rare, fleeting expression. "Begin with the people closest to you. Show them that you care, that their lives matter. Leadership isn't about commanding from above. It's about standing with your people, showing them that you will fight for them, no matter what." The words felt like a revelation. Emily had been so focused on the weight of her position that she hadn't realized the true meaning of leadership. It wasn't about being the strongest or the most powerful. It was about being there for those who depended on her, about showing them that she was worthy of their loyalty. "I will do that," she said, her voice filled with determination. Caleb nodded, his gaze softening. "I know you will. And I'll be with you every step of the way." The connection between them, though quiet, was undeniable. Emily felt something shift within her, a sense of clarity and purpose. She wasn't just Caleb's mate anymore. She was the future of the pack, and she would stand by him as an equal, not just in title, but in spirit. The next few days were spent in quieter moments, as Emily began to connect more with the pack. She spent time with the betas, the warriors, and even the omegas, learning their names, their stories, and their hopes for the future. Each conversation brought her closer to understanding the people she was meant to lead. The more she listened, the more she realized that her role as Luna wasn't just about commanding respect. It was about earning it, through kindness, understanding, and strength of character. As she stood with Caleb in the grand hall one evening, surrounded by the members of the pack, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was her life now, and it was hers to shape. The journey ahead would be difficult, but with Caleb by her side, and with the pack's trust, she felt ready to face whatever challenges came their way. The pack had not only accepted her, they had made her one of their own. And for the first time in her life, Emily felt truly seen, truly heard, and ready to lead. The days after Emily's newfound clarity passed in a whirlwind of activity. Her role as Luna had taken on a new meaning. She wasn't just the Alpha King's mate anymore. She was a true leader, ready to stand by Caleb and guide their people. Her efforts to connect with the pack had paid off, as she had slowly earned their respect, though the work was far from finished. Caleb had been patient with her, offering his guidance when needed, but he never pressured her. He trusted her to grow into her role, and that trust had become a driving force behind her efforts. As time went on, Emily found herself more at ease within the walls of the palace, more confident in her decisions, and more certain of her place at Caleb's side. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Caleb turned to her with a rare smile. "You've come a long way, Emily," he said, his voice warm with approval. Emily glanced up at him, her heart swelling with pride. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. Caleb chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You've always had it in you. I just helped you see it." His words were simple, but they meant everything to her. For so long, she had doubted herself, had felt unworthy of the life she now led. But Caleb had shown her that she was strong, capable, and deserving of the role she held. "I know this isn't easy," Caleb continued, his tone turning serious. "You've faced challenges that most can't even imagine, but you've handled them with grace." Emily nodded, though the weight of the responsibility still felt heavy on her shoulders. She had never expected to become Luna, never imagined she would be leading a pack of wolves. But now that she was here, she knew there was no turning back. "There's still so much to learn," she said quietly, "but I'm ready to face it." Caleb's gaze softened as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "And you will, with strength and wisdom." As the days went by, Caleb and Emily continued to strengthen their bond. They spent more time together, not just as leader and mate, but as partners. Their connection had deepened, and the quiet moments they shared only made that bond stronger. Emily had learned to trust Caleb fully, and in turn, she felt his trust in her grow. But not all challenges came from external threats. The internal struggle of balancing their roles as leaders and partners began to weigh on Emily's mind. One evening, as they sat together in their chambers, Emily turned to Caleb with a question that had been bothering her. "Do you ever feel like you have to be the alpha all the time?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Caleb paused, his expression thoughtful. "It's part of who I am," he said slowly. "But it doesn't define me. I don't always have to wear the crown, and neither do you. We are who we are, and we are stronger together because of it." Emily looked at him, her heart swelling with affection. Caleb had never once made her feel like she was beneath him, like she wasn't an equal. He had always treated her with respect, and now, more than ever, she saw that he believed in her. "I want to be the best Luna I can be," she said softly. "For you, for the pack, for us." Caleb smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "And you will be. You already are." The words filled her with a sense of peace she hadn't known she needed. With Caleb's unwavering support, Emily knew she could face whatever came next. Together, they would lead their pack into the future, side by side, as equals. Their journey had only just begun, but Emily was no longer afraid. She had found her place, not only in Caleb's life, but in the life of the pack. And with that, she felt ready to face whatever challenges awaited them, knowing that she was no longer the Omega who had been discarded. She was Luna, and nothing would ever take that from her.